So that's set up. I'm not digging this background and this whole Zoom background. For those of y'all joining me on Instagram, welcome. For those of y'all joining me on Facebook and YouTube Live, thank you for joining. Welcome, welcome. It is Friday, the How to Align with Transformation series that I do. So I'm keeping it real, honest, open, and willing. I'm going to share vulnerably about the process of transformation it has been for me to bring y'all a point of focus for how you guys align within your own lives and with transformation. So this week I started rolling out a lot of my new projects that I have been working on. So if you had stayed tuned last week, one of the big announcements was that one of those big projects is my app. So I released an app called Power in Perspective. And right now it's still in the works, but the free version is available to anyone in Apple and Google Play stores. And it's really just trying to help give people access to having mental health resources, and then have access to consultation with myself, or getting them to another therapist if they are interested in actually beginning therapy, but giving people the opportunity to have access to resources that they can use on their own in their own healing journey. And they can access that through my app called Power in Perspective. So check it out. I would love to get some feedback on how accessible and easy it is to use. But one of those, so that was the big announcement last week. And then I am starting to put the rest of my content out there in terms of my podcast episodes. And I'm also growing a TikTok following. So if anyone is watching this and you follow me on TikTok, one of the things that I started doing specifically for TikTok, because everyone knows you got to hack the algorithm and be consistent with something. So I was like, what is something that I can be consistent with ongoing, and gaining followers? And I realized it's probably something that I can do on this live too. And that is how we use affirmations. Now, I'm holding this up because this is how I have practiced affirmations throughout my whole journey, until they stuck. Because the thing about affirmations, I think for a lot of people, especially if you're coming from a place of emotional backlog, is what I call it, or like emotional debt is what I call depression, anxiety, a lot of the mental illnesses, is that it's really hard to get going with anything, right? Starting can sometimes be the hardest part. Maintaining is challenging in itself, but those all have processes to them. And sometimes we just got to take it slow, and we need some other accountability outside of ourselves. So these affirmator cards are what I started using. I actually got the idea from a friend of mine who's their therapist had them, and using them with using the cards with them. And so I started using them with a lot of my clients as well. And a lot of the times this is good for having that prompt outside of ourselves to be able to really get into what affirmations can be. I think a lot of people, I've gotten some mixed reviews about what affirmations can be for people. And some of them think that they're really corny. I was one of those people at first. If you are one of those people, I totally get it, because it's like, so you want me to lie to myself? And then I'm like, oh, maybe a little. No. But I'm like, I tell my clients, it's not necessarily lying. It's practicing a line. It's practicing a narrative that you may want to adopt at some point. And it's practicing to a point where you're not just reciting it in your head. You're not just keeping it inside. It's so common when we get anxious, once we've activated that central nervous system ours and become reactive, we forget things. We lose focus on what's going on around us. We can have spans of inattention. We can get overwhelmed and have analysis paralysis. And having something, which is a lot of the times people come to therapy, like I'm the affirmator, right? And I absolutely love to be, but I also want to give people a way to practice that affirmation outside of that. My biggest MO, and what you guys will learn about me as I, put myself out there, is because I am a clinical social worker, so a therapist, but I specialize in addictions. I have a really big passion for helping people understand we do not have to be dependent on things outside of ourselves for a lot of things that we do. And that includes affirmation. That includes not just substances. Addiction is not just something that is taking drugs or even eating food, for me, like a substance or food addiction. It is just the expectation of having a relief of something outside of yourself. So if you're one of those people who has a lot of trouble making decisions, especially when I'm hungry, if you're one of those people who really needs to seek advice before doing something, the consequence of that may be that you haven't really filled your self-efficacy or fulfilled your self-efficacy and your self-esteem to know how to form really sound decision making for yourself. So therefore you become dependent on external perspectives for affirming your worth. That can get really messy, y'all. It can get messy. It's not always a bad thing. I try to stay away from a lot of that good bad terminology because that tends to be loaded with a judgment of a feeling. And what I mean by that is, like, because we're feeling like that could be bad, therefore it is bad. It's affirmed and confirmed for us that it's bad for us to go seek insights and advice or gain perspective from someone else. But it becomes consequential when you don't have any other ability to do that for yourself if no one's available, right? So that's where that fine line, but we also have a lot of room in being able to find a balance of what insights do we need, what affirmation do we need from other people, and what are we really looking for ourselves. Okay, so what I wanted to do is just kind of give y'all a kind of a demo of how I do this for myself. Now, when I first started, I kept these. Your environment is very important. I kept these right next to my bed at first, so I would just remember that I had them. Because when I was first starting out, it's a little different than what I'm kind of restarting my own program now, because I had to take a really kind of a big L, if I'm going to be honest with you, a big L in a decision that I had to make to take care of myself. And that came with a lot of transition and stress. And I got sick. And then it, anyways, snowballed, right? So I'm still struggling even today. I don't want to say struggling. I'm getting back towards getting in a more effective routine, even as soon as today. Like, being able to, and that's kind of part of life, right? Like, sometimes we're going to have routines thrown at us and or things thrown at us that mess up our routines. And so we have to be able to go through the motions without collecting more frustration and more negativity that's usually brought on by our own selves. I don't know about you, but I am my worst critic. I am my most challenging opponent when it comes to perfection, when it comes to having things the way that I want it. Sometimes I expect way too much of myself, which is not a bad thing, but then it also can be if I'm not able to affirm my worth and then also like regain my focus. So I want to just show you these. Oh, these are available. You can get them on Amazon. I see them in Target. They're really accessible. If you want, I have an Amazon storefront that I can link in the bio, but they're really easy to find if you just type in affirmators, okay? And real quick too, I want to just make this point. When I do these with my male clients, I always enjoy them because they're usually They're the most gratifying, honestly, because then I'm like, oh, I don't want to pick an affirmation card. I'll just make up my own affirmation. I'm like, all right, do you? But at the same time, when they give it a chance, they're like, never mind. Can we do those again? Can I pull a card again? And I'm like, yeah, you can pull a card. So what I really enjoy is like, I try not to interpret this for them. I really want people to interpret this for their own lives, but a lot of times it helps just kind of get us out of what we're already dealing with. So these also played a really critical role in my transition home from like during COVID times when I was in the office doing therapy, never had done any other type of therapy other than in person, went to virtual therapy, and I lost people's ability to choose a card on their own. So these also influenced a lot of my spirituality these days. And because I started to realize in trying to create or recreate a system of engagement for people over the internet, that I was challenged to really figure out, okay, how do I make this unique and authentic to the person? So because I don't have anyone, oh, I do have one person. I don't know. Hold on, let me see. Anyways, I'm going to just pick my own card, but I usually have my clients really take it as a moment to take a breath because I want you guys to focus. I want you to focus all of your magical unicorn energy. Can you see why my men would be like, no, I don't want to do these cards. Your magical unicorn energy. I want you to focus it here to that and take a deep breath and really ask yourself, what do I need to hear? What do I need? Okay. And I'm going to pick whatever card calls to me. And then here, and then I read it, right? So the card I picked, divine timing. Everything is timing, and timing is everything. Gladly, I release my concern over timing and let things happen when and as they will. I trust that the divine schedule makers know what they're doing, and it can take a long time to reach divine middle management. So, no coincidences here. In terms of talking about affirmations, so what I'm going to talk about how I tell my clients to use these, but then also how I use them, right? So I tell people that this is a focal point either for your day. It can be used as an intention, something that you find within your day, or it can be something that you act upon. So in attempts to be more organized and structured, I wrote down a couple of points that I really want you guys to take away about what affirmations can do in your life. And just so happens, the first one is really about the concept of not all affirmations are created equal. Like we cannot always find a way to relate sometimes to something, and that's okay. Do what you have to do to be able to relate to what it is that you need to hear. So whether that be writing your own affirmations, but a lot of the times I find people get stuck or they become inconsistent in using affirmations because they're not gradually, or they're, first of all, they're not perceived as something that you gradually have to ease into. And they're also never, very rarely act. Hey, you too, Rob, have a great day. They're never usually perceived to be matched with action. So what I was saying about intention, about finding this in your day, finding how you make your attention come back to the intention of picking this card, that's how you facilitate that flow of meaning and value in your life, okay? So the way that I'll talk about this one in terms of words and action together is, so divine timing. For me, this is already affirming because I have these running themes in a lot of my sessions every week with people. And at first I was like, well, Sara, you're just making that up because it's just about what you want to talk about. And it's ultimately about what I'm going through. There is a risk and a chance that that does happen, right? But nonetheless, it's happening. And I do my best to try to keep the appointment that I have with my client pretty unbiased, to be something that they want to bring up and how they relate to it. And this week's theme has been a lot around our relationship with time. So this was very affirmative, like everything happens the way that it's supposed to and when it's supposed to. And we as as individuals must, part of transformation and using affirmations is to affirm our moment in time, to reduce our anxiety that's happening because of our internal response system telling us like, be stressed, be stressed, be stressed, because you got stuff to pay attention to. Long-term exposure to that can be really, it's counterproductive because now you're just frazzled all the freaking time, right? And so affirmations are really about trying to bring us back down, grounding. That's where that breath comes in. That's where that focal point of the unicorn energy, I try to have them send it here, is because I am the grounding principle for people as a therapist. And if I'm not intentional with that, then I sometimes can, honestly, I'm just kind of delaying their progress. And I don't know about you, I really like a good value. I love a good sale, and I don't want to keep anyone in therapy for the rest of their lives. I want people to be able to come in, learn what they need to learn about themselves, how they need to cope, and then put that coping into action in their life so they can get going back in their life again. That's my philosophy on therapy and counseling and consulting, but everyone's different. But that's ultimately really what people are coming to therapy for, is because they want to feel better. So let's feel better and do better. Okay. So that is in turn kind of that's how I apply it, right? When I sit here and I think about and reflect on my day, sometimes I could have like a really shitty day, to be honest with you. And some of my clients would be, not making progress. If I bleed into their emotion and I don't find a way to affirm myself for the influence that I did have, then our relationship, therapeutic relationship, could be really skewed from that point on. Because if I get frustrated at my own self or get frustrated at my client for not seeing things that they're going through and doing anything different, that's detrimental to the relationship. And so honestly, this practice in itself for me, sometimes I do it first thing in the morning. Sometimes I do it after a session. And sometimes I actually take the client's, card and I'm like, you know what, this was pulled for me too, because I'm present. So that is me actually in a form putting this into action in different areas of my life. And when we do that, those small ways of just recognizing the affirmation of the moment, of that timing of like, we receive every message for a reason at the time that we receive it, then it can also actually start to reinforce that affirmation and that belief in yourself. Okay. So the next point I really want to make, and this was again running theme, because divine timing, that relationship with time is a very crucial topic within my field when I work with clients. Anxiety and stress is what speeds up time and our perception of time. So the concept of motivation comes into talk a lot. So I really wanted to pose this point for y'all. When you're getting started with something, when you're trying to gain a progress and align within your own transformation and remain consistent with something, motivation, don't wait for it. You can't, I know this is a very common point out there. You have to build discipline. Well, this is a discipline. This is something that I had to just remind myself every single day. I did the best that I could to do what I could to get it in my routine every single day. If I wasn't consistent at it at first, I had to just let that go. I had to just stop and let that be yesterday and focus on today. And that momentum over motivation, that's my point for y'all. Gaining momentum rather than gaining motivation. Because if you can gain momentum in being like, okay, I want to use these cards as much as possible, you get yourself focused on, let me just get to that point. You don't have to get up and go to the gym all the damn time. You don't. I love the gym, but you do not have to get up and go every single day to be successful with losing weight. You don't. Like, there's a combination of things. And if you overwhelm yourself in the process of trying to do all of those things, sorry, this is flipping my hair too much. If you overwhelm yourself with the expectation of, I need to be motivated, I don't feel motivated, I'm sorry, that's one of the biggest moments of just disconnect for people. I see it happen all the time. The pressure that we put on ourselves and expect ourselves to reach, and it honestly is a goal. Like, goals are healthy, but then at the same time, the expectation of ourselves to reach them like that can lead into my third point, which is shame. It can ignite shame. If you do not meet your own expectations, one of the most common parenting tools of the last generation has been shame. It's effective. It sticks. It is also going to keep you coming back to the same thing. Shame equals the same. If you shame yourself, it may be able to start cultivating a momentum for you, but it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable whatsoever. And I don't speak out that much on social media, but that could be changing soon. So, but I see a lot of coaches doing their best to not provoke shame. But this is also where I would challenge any person, whether you're getting started or whether you're the person that helps get people started on their journeys. How does shame come through within how you interact with yourself? Because if you're interacting with any degree of shame within yourself, it can bleed into shame with how you interact with other people, in the way of your tone and in the way of just your action. In your internal dialogue is what ultimately gets projected out into the world for people. And you could be an aware, I pride myself on I'm pretty self-aware. But when we get stressed, when we get reactive of any kind, we create a bias for ourselves just by being emotional. And when it's hard to realize that, because you're already emotional, you have to build a practice of gaining perspective from your own self to realize, like, oh, I'm not paying full attention right now because I haven't been able to. First of all, I'm talking about awareness as I practice it today after 5 years of building this discipline of awareness. When I first started, this is your indicator of shame can be present. Should statements. Should statements typically have, if they have a presence in our language, they're usually tied to an all or nothing expectation where shame becomes the reinforcement. So when we have, like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, there's this little internal, just something to imagine. It's like, for some people, it's a really obvious thing because they get so down on themselves that they just they wither into nothingness. But for a lot of us, it's very subtle. It's very like, oh, I should be doing that. And if you don't do it right there, what's happening is that you're breaking your word to yourself. Especially if it was something that you did with intention, to be like, I need to go grocery shopping, or I should be going grocery shopping, but yet I'm staying in bed and watching Netflix. That right there, we can rationalize. It would be a rationalization at this point to be like, look, you needed the rest, but it also has a byproduct of shame because it causes that dissonance of how we haven't showed up for ourselves. And we didn't do the thing that we said we wanted to do, we needed to do, or that we put on our calendar that would be meaningful for us or someone it is that we care about. So shame will keep us in the same dynamic, and it can really become the true barrier to why affirmations don't stick for us. And they have to be something that we become consistent with, because over time, they will eventually become our new narrative. Over time, they will eventually start make us remember, like, you know what? I think that lady who keeps like doing like this talk that kind of can be rambly, she talks about shame and how everything's supposed to happen at a time that it's supposed to. We will eventually become exposed to it the more that we use it within our language and do it outside of ourselves. But please be kind with yourselves, because this is, if you are coming from that backlogged place of depression, or just being in a funk, like if you don't call it depression, if it's just not feeling like your true self or a new time period. For me, I'm kind of like in that weird space where I'm like, I'm not depressed. I'm not, but it is a season of loss for me. It's a lot of transition, so there's a lot going on. It's also a winter season where seasonal affective disorder became an issue for me. Then I got sick, and I'm like, okay, all of this together, I was knocked off on my keister, as my stepmother would say, or my grandmother technically. I was knocked off, and getting myself and finding a new routine that is also up against the unknown of my life and kind of what I am working on to present to y'all. It's a lot. And if I allowed shame to be present, which it's crept its way back in already, but I've also been able to train my brain to be on the lookouts for the should statements and the should thoughts. Because if you're having should thoughts and you're not actually having like words come out of your mouth and like you're talking to someone, or you're seeing it in your journal, then your should thoughts need to be. That's why journaling can be so important, is because it is the representation of what's going on in your brain, and it's a reference point for you to evaluate. So when you come to therapy, you don't necessarily have to journal. If you're in my intensive program, you have to journal. But there's no, one way to journal. It's any way that you see fit. It could be for 30 seconds of like, F this shit, I don't want to journal. Okay, what can we learn about that? You're not connected with it. Like, you can shift your own perspective any single time that you're just willing to kind of get the things that are going on in the place of invisibility into the real world for yourself. See it on paper. And then you can truly rewrite the narrative and use other affirmations outside of yourself to affirm, like, okay, do I like what I see? Well, no, but everything's happening for a reason right now. And I can practice this and see how I feel about it later. If I don't believe the BS of the affirmation card, well, then I'll make that judgment later. That's how the emotional regulation and thought restructuring happens within therapy. And so I want just people to have access to doing this work on your own. And I really think that it's very reasonable for people to do it on their own. I'm a little biased because I did it on my own, and not fully on my own. I went back to therapy in some regard, but it was usually because I was looking for a certain affirmation to be able to make myself feel like I wasn't going crazy in my own head. That's all it was. So let me make sure I hit all my points for y'all. I'm also working on trying to be a lot more brief. Yeah, so no, I got all the shoulds. The shame will keep you the same. Focus on momentum over motivation, and try to match your words and your action. This card in itself being an action of like just reading the card, but then the next step in action can be you applying the card. There's some cards in here. Let me see if I can find one that's like a little bit more like there's a communications card. It says, wonder how that other person's feeling. Well, ask them. So if you're making assumptions in your life, whether it's an assumption about yourself or assumption about other people, this can be a way of practicing that that action of like, you know what, I need to find a way to bring communication to the forefront of my life today. So they're really good at kind of individual accountability. So if you don't and you don't feel ready to go into doing more of an immersive therapy experience, then you have a little bit of therapy outside of that. But to just kind of wrap things up for today, you also have a little bit of therapy. If you really, you kind of want to get to know me a little bit more, go through my story, check out my website, and also check out my app. It just got released last week. I am working on building the subscriptions into it and a little bit more of a self-guided coaching program in there, and be able to have people have access to a clinical professional like myself that's experienced and versed in practicing a lot of these skills while you figure that out on your own. Because the thing is that a lot of us are already going to figure it out on our own anyway, but using guidance, so you don't necessarily, and having and using your resources like me, I'm a resource for people to be able to find your direction and get back on track. Because I just want to say this real quick. If you're journaling and journaling overwhelms you, or it actually feels like it makes things worse, then that's not the true point. You may have, it's very indicative of a backlog, but you also may just be kind of getting stuck in your own emotion and looking at it and then not really able to truly get to the past that point where you can really gather the insights that you need from your own thought processes. So I do have some short-term consultation slots available to be able to give you all that insight and that redirection, and you can kind of come and go and just have like some consultation in the process and not just have to do everything on your own. Okay, so thank you guys. Make sure you subscribe to my blog as well. I'll be sending out a lot of my perspectives and my tips via email to help people kind of stay accountable that way. But yeah, the app is probably the biggest project I've been working on. So make sure you go to the website and you can find the links there, or you can go to the Apple and Google Play stores and find Power in Perspective. And yeah, let me know what y'all think. If you'd like specific resources for things, definitely shoot me some feedback and I can find you some resources so you don't get lost on the immense amount of information that the internet holds. I tell my clients that, yeah, no, they're not allowed to do that. They can't do it. They do it anyway, but I look at them and I'm like, what are we talking about? Why'd you go Googling things, please? Like that, it makes my job only a little easier because I get to like help them understand like that's not a lot of times it's just misinformation or misplaced information. It's not wrong information. It's just they're not quite in the place that they need to be for it to make sense for how it's going to help them. So I'm going to be quiet now. 33 minutes is enough, but thank you guys for tuning in. I will be back next Friday at 10 a.m. with another point and helpful point, hopefully, about how to align with transformation and sustainable change in your life. So peace. Enjoy your rest of your Friday and your weekend.